We're going to assume everybody has a hearing aid, so we're going to speak at this volume.
Or this volume, if you prefer.
That's very good. Should be an actor. Alright, are you ready? Okay, it's Thursday the 28th of November 2013, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm setting the scene. It's Antony and Francesco again.
Hello.
I haven't done anything since beginning of October, a couple of months. We did a conversation, which is a YouTube video called A Conversation Between Free Thinkers. And we're going to do another conversation. In England, we have a kind of joke that when you make a sequel to a movie, you have to put "this time it's personal." Because, you know, one of those cop films where the guy, his best friend gets killed in the first one, and he kind of maybe doesn't kill the villain, and the next one is revenge. So this time it's personal. So this is a conversation between free thinkers to this time it's personal.
And this time it's personal.
But not too personal. Right, so we did this talk a couple of months ago. We'll just briefly review it. We went through the difference between mainstream and alternative. And I want to talk in a minute about the tension between those two, because I've been to a few groups recently, and I'm not going to name any names, but there's a kind of pattern which is being established, and I can talk about it actually, where they tend not to trust anybody who's in the mainstream. So if we take Chomsky, for example, Chomsky said 9/11 conspiracy theories were a waste of time, or even if it's true, it's not important, which upset a few people.
And I think he did the same with the the way money is created and the Federal Reserve.
He never mentions
objections.
He never mentions fractional reserve banking.
Yes, and the fact that the money we use is created by private commercial banks in most cases.
Exactly. And another example is Julian Assange. And I guess even Edward Snowden, because Edward Snowden, the information's in the mainstream, but I have to say that some groups tend to mistrust them because they're in the mainstream. But what's the danger there? That means that if we get all this information out into the mainstream, immediately it's going to be distrusted.
Yes.
And it's kind of the opposite. I'm a teacher, and I was doing a reading from an advanced textbook, and it was an article that came from the Daily Telegraph, which is a kind of right-wing bastion of the conservative system.
The Tory graph, as they say.
The Tory graph, that's the one. And it was taken from that, and it was all about how alternative medicine is all charlatans and not to be trusted at all.
Snake
it's all
oil.
witch doctors and heathens and that kind of thing. Primitive, pagan superstition, yeah. And what they said was that the only alternative things you can trust is ones which have got into the mainstream. Which is kind of interesting, because they're still the same thing, but because they're mainstream, then they're trusted. Now, what the problem we've got is that we've got the opposite situation as well. So we've got alternative people. As soon as something is mainstream, they say, "Oh, Edward Snowden's co-opted, Julian Assange is co-opted." Now, they may be co-opted to some extent. I honestly, to me, it's so complicated and the layers beyond layers that I never really claim to know things for sure. I'm wary of making big pronouncements. But can you see this tension? Because then you're just in two camps, and then you.
Yeah, I think I understand what you mean.
You know what I mean?
Well, I think we should look at what interesting, what good things these people did actually. What was the good side of their involvement in make us understand. Certain things that we didn't understand before they revealed them to us. And then these are human beings, so they will probably make mistakes, and they will maybe say some things that we don't agree with, or do things we disagree with. But I think we shouldn't discard everything, and just because they've done something bad or said something bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the other thing is that it's naive to think that someone can go on TV, even someone with a, I was going to say a secure reputation like Chomsky. I mean, let's be honest, Chomsky is not really secure in the mainstream. He's known, he's quite a famous figure, but I mean, I didn't really know much about him until fairly recently. I do these little experiments. I like kind of reaching out to the public rather than just sort of writing them off as sort of sheeple and everything. I try and reach out to them, and I do these little experiments. Like, you know, you ask 100 people who's known Chomsky, and I'm curious to know out of 100 random people how many have heard of him. And I haven't asked exactly 100, but, you know, probably asked 30 people, and 3 or 4 have heard of him. So he's not really, you know, he's not as famous as Justin Bieber, you know.
Yeah.
But I'm actually reading at the moment Manufacturing Consent. You've probably seen the film, haven't you?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just reading the book, and one of the interesting things is what's called media filters. Now, I don't remember if we covered this, so I'll be brief in case we've already covered it. The media filters is all the things that stop the media saying exactly what they want to reporting exactly what they want to, even if they're a journalist with integrity who, you know, wants to report it. And advertising, for example, is a big one, you know, because there's a famous story that I was told that Michael Meacher, who's an MP who used to be in Blair's government and resigned over Iraq, I could actually put a link to it. He did a story in The Guardian saying the war on terror is a hoax. And he came up with some pretty good information. He mentioned the famous PNAC document. You must know about that.
The project for the new American century.
Rebuilding America's defences.
The new Pearl Harbor.
The new Pearl Harbor, yeah. And I heard a story that their subsidies, they lost like £1 million in subsidies.
Advertisements.
Yeah, and they said, oh no, we're not touching that, mate. You know, none of that 9/11 stuff. So, you know, I would say to those people who just distrust anyone in the mainstream, you know, number one, you know, as you said, they're human beings. They've got careers to develop. You know, it's all a game. The media is a game. Let's be honest. You know, we can sit here saying what we want, but if we were getting paid for it, and we might have to curb our conspiratorial excesses. You know.
Luckily, we are skinned and nobody's paying us, and so we can say whatever we want.
We can say whatever we want. Yeah, I've just spent an expensive week in London spending lots of money feeding myself, which is criminal behaviour, you know. I read a couple of months ago Naomi Klein's book, The Shock Doctrine, which we did mention last time. And I mean, she doesn't speak out about 9/11. Amy Goodman from Democracy Now!
Yes.
You know, a very, quote unquote, I'm doing the quote marks, controversial figure. She doesn't mention 9/11 too much, although she did chair a debate between Loose Change and Popular Mechanics, but they were never going to reach agreement, those two. So there's people that don't touch it, but the stuff that's in the Shock Doctrine and the stuff that's in Chomsky's books, you know, they're talking about millions of innocent people dying because of government incompetence or corruption. You know, they're because they don't cover this particular event doesn't mean they're not uncovering controversial stuff. So I just kind of wanted to say that. And quite pertinent is the Russell Brand interview, which was about a month ago, I think, with Jeremy Paxman, who's how would I describe him? Sort of a pompous git, you know. He's not a bad guy, but I'm saying he fits the mould of a pompous Englishman especially with his new beard and everything. But no, I've got nothing against him especially. But so Russell Brand did this interview, and we were discussing earlier. What he actually said was not really groundbreaking to anybody who's in the know, so to speak.
Yeah, he said that, you know, politicians are a bunch of crooks and we can't trust them, and you shouldn't vote for them.
Yeah.
Then he
you
said
shouldn't
that
vote.
You shouldn't vote at all,
vote.
actually.
Yeah.
And then he also said that inequalities are growing, and that we need a revolution. I think these are the three main points.
And he mentioned corporations, which really not particularly mentioned that much. I think he said something about corporations that run riot, etc. But I think what was revolutionary, is that the word? What's revolutionary is just that he's a guy who's got mainstream credibility and exposure. You know, it's actually funny enough. About a year ago, I don't use Twitter, but I was very tempted. I was going to write to Russell Brand or email him or something and say that, Russell, I know that you know about David Icke, and I know that you know that he talks a lot of sense. You know, lizards, take away the lizards and everything. I know you know it, but I know you've also got to do all this silly stuff you do on TV.